to the House Ag and Natural Resource Budget Committee. We're going to kind of finish this bill up today, House Bill 2386. I'm going to have the revisor give a little brief overview of the bill. Just to start with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I remember from yesterday's hearing on House Bill 2386. This was the bill that would prohibit government officials or employees of any state agency, county, or city from entering or remaining on private property unless they are authorized pursuant to a search warrant, court order, subpoena, or the United States Constitution, or the owner of the property has given written consent. The prohibitions of the bill did not apply to a law enforcement officer during the course of such law enforcement officer's duty. And then there was a couple of amendments placed on the bill yesterday afternoon by the committee. There was the motion by Representative Jacobs to include the as a exemption from the bill. So it'd be in the subsection B, we'd have the law enforcement officer, and there would it would also be the officially designated protection and advocacy system for the state as required by federal law. So, and that was adopted by the committee yesterday. Then there was a secondary amendment adopted. This was the larger balloon that was passed out. This was then included that the employees or officials that to be acting within the scope of their employment to be prohibited from entering and remaining on private property. That way, that when they're off the clock, they won't get booted out of a restaurant or a church or any other private facility, just because they're off the clock and a government employee. And then this also then includes that the use of aerial surveillance would be prohibited when those government officials or employees are in their scope of employment. They cannot use aerial surveillance that would be considered entering or remaining on private property. Did include language then also allow the administrative warrants to be one of the authorized documents that would allow for entry along with search warrant, court order, subpoena, administrative warrant, or the Constitution of the United States. And there was also then the exigent circumstances exist requiring entry on such property. That'd be another avenue for a government official or employee to enter into private property. And then those exigent circumstances, again, that's sort of the emergency situation. There's some if somebody's in trouble, there's reason to prevent some sort of destruction of or injury. And that was adopted yesterday, and that was where we left off, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, committee. That was what we got. That was where we left it yesterday. So I guess questions or any additional amendments? Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify some of the things that was just discussed. You listed off several things. What was it after the aerial survey? You talked about administrative warrants, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know what you said. Administrative warrants, refer to that again, please.
Yes, that would be in line. That would be included in line 10. That would be versus like a search warrant. This would be an administrative warrant that a government agency would seek to gain access for the purposes to administer a particular program. I believe Department of Ag, and there's a few others that have that. It's usually a creature of statute. It's not your normal Fourth Amendment search warrant as you go get, but it's similar in nature. It's just for that limited administrative purpose. It's not really a law enforcement purpose. But.
So they could enter for those with
that would be in one of the.
They have to obtain an administrative warrant.
If they obtain that, that would be one of those that would allow for entry onto the property.
Does that come from the court, or do they have that in their office?
It would come from the court.
Okay. And then after, if I might, after that one, I lost you. I don't know what number 5 would have been. And I'm sorry, but for some reason my folder isn't here on this project. So I don't have a copy of the bill in front of me. After administrative warrants, what was the next thing you said?
The next thing would be instead, so it's 1, 2, and then we'd have a new, or 3, and this would be exigent circumstances exist requiring entry on such property. And that is that emergency type of situation, immediate. There's, a concern about danger or, to somebody that would require, a government official to run onto that property, for that particular, to alleviate that particular emergency situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, some questions? Any other questions for Dave?
Did he talk about the fiscal note?
Dave, do you have anything on the physical note?
I do. I don't have anything on the note. I don't know if Luke or anybody has anything on that. I'm not sure.
Okay. You got it.
I think we should talk about it.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. There is a fiscal note located or on the bill on the legislature's website, 2386. Fiscal note is there. As you all know, that's created by the Division of the Budget. The Department of Agriculture indicates an enactment of 2386 would increase expenditures by $167,000 from the general fund, including 70,000 and one attorney FTE position and 45,000 for one FTE legal assistant position. And the remaining amounts of that would be for benefits, for fringe benefits, health insurance. The department also indicates that positions would be needed to judiciously and timely obtain written consent or search warrants to carry out the statutory authority of its regulatory programs. For the Department of Wildlife and Parks, indicates that enactment of 2386 would increase expenditures by $77,000 from all funding sources in 2023 to develop and implement landowner permission database. The department indicates the bill would increase its expenditures by $322,874 from all funding sources in 2024 to hire an additional 6 FTE administrative staff positions who will administer the database, including overseeing the landowner permission status and updating landowner permission information. Kansas Corporation Commission indicates enactment of 2386 would conflict with its current statutory ingress and egress rights to inspect, investigate, and take emergency action to remediate. However, they are unable to estimate the fiscal effect. And then the League of Counties, Municipalities, and Administration indicate that enactment of the bill would have no fiscal effect. And essentially, Mr. Chair, I just kind of walked through the document there, the fiscal note. For everybody, again, that is located online.
Questions? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the, obviously this fiscal note was written before the amendments. How many of these would be affected by that?
No, thank you. Thank you, Representative. Luke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, this very good question, and thank you. This is for as introduced, and so it does not include the fiscal effect or estimate for the amendments.
Questions? Any questions? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just a quick addition here on the fiscal note, since it's not all tallied up. So like what they've indicated to be about a $500,000 fiscal note. Is that right? Or is it more than that? And then the other question I have is that in that fiscal note, it also mentions the Kansas Corporation Commission. They did not assign an amount, but they did indicate that there would be additional cost associated as well as delays in their investigations. And so my question, I guess, to staff would be, did the amendments that were offered yesterday take care of KCC's issue as well? Or do we know?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I want to.
Identify, tell us who you are.
Sorry, my name is Peter Barstad, a legislative liaison with the Kansas Corporation Commission. We'd need to circle back and see what that effect would be. As we indicated, it's difficult to estimate what the initial introduced bill's impact would be. We know it would result in a lot longer staff time, difficulties, but then if there were an emergency, longer remediation could result in a more difficulty, greater cost, but we don't know exactly how to predict those or quantify them right now. So looking at those amendments, we need to take a little more time and look at what any amendments added to this bill may do to impact that fiscal note. And I'd be happy to follow up with staff or follow up with the committee assistant or the staff directly.
So beyond the fiscal issue, do you think that this legislation would impede your ability to carry out what you're statutorily required to do?
As indicated, it would conflict with our current. Yes, I believe so. Sorry, I'll try to speak a little louder. Yes, as indicated in that fiscal note, we do believe it would conflict with our current statutory obligations and duties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's see, we've approved, we're okay on it, just going, you want to say something?
Go ahead.
So we're good on the amendments. Are we ready now for a motion to,
I have a question.
okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
In Mr. Weiss's synopsis of the bill, number 2 thing you said was acting within employment. And I didn't ask you about that, but when I read the amendment yesterday, if I read the entire sentence, it says no government official or employee of any state agency, county, or city acting within the scope of such official's employment shall enter or remain on property unless.
That's private property.
Private property, yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't exempt them if they're working, is that correct? Unless whatever follows after that. But at first glance, it looks like it exempts them, but reading it carefully, they have to have a search warrant, a court order, a subpoena, an administrative warrant, or be supported by the Constitution. So they can't go in without paperwork. So it just clarifies that it means even acting within the scope of your official employment, that you have to have some kind of paperwork. Am I correct?
You talking to me or David?
I want the legal analysis of that, not our opinion, because I read it wrong yesterday.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carlin, yes, you are correct in that. In your reading of it, no government official or employee of any state agency, county, or city, and then acting within the scope of their employment. So when they are on the job, for whatever reason they happen to, for whatever agency, whatever they do, when they're in their employment duties, when they're off the clock, this doesn't apply, but when they're on duty, they could not enter or remain on private property unless they have one or two. Yes, so they would need a written document or written permission.
Much.
Motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that HB 2386 be passed out as amended.
Second. Alcala? Those in favor say yes.
No,
Oh, discussion.
I
I'm
got
sorry.
discussion.
Was
Oh, I
that a
thought-
second?
I thought it was a second.
He seconded it.
Oh,
No, it's Randy.
oh, this guy seconded
No, I
it.
thought you seconded it.
Randy seconded. Oh, so I thought you seconded. You got discussion. You got discussion now.
I was trying to
Okay.
get either one of you two.
Okay, I'm ready now. A lot of hands flying.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I can't support this, and I want to explain to everyone why. First of all, you may find this hard to believe, but I think I'm a pretty conservative Democrat, and I have problems with adding more dollars to the budget, adding 6 FTE positions plus cost of benefits to the budget if this passes. But in reality, and some of you people that are farmers and have farmers in your district, you'll understand this more than I do. I have serious concerns that Department of Parks and Wildlife indicated that this would restrict them in getting immediate access or working through conservation projects. I have problems with the Kansas Transportation Department not being able to do ingress, egress when they're either surveying or, because I've seen them sometimes on private property when I travel. But my biggest concern, there's two of them. One of them is, I think this kind of is round under the radar because I have spoke to a couple people. Where's the Cattlemen's Association at on this issue? I bet they're not big supporters of this, and that's my opinion. Where's the soybean and meal folks? Where are they at on this issue? I was talking to a farmer up north that I know, and I brought this up to him. He had no idea that this was on the table. His concern was that he has streams and a creek that runs through some of his acreage, and he has cattle. His concerns was that if there was ever some type of spill or some type of accident where someone had to come in there and quarantine that water right away, so his cattle, livestock didn't go down and drink it or wave. And his concern was that if he's not immediately available, then they wouldn't be able to go in there and quarantine or whatever they do in those types of situations. These are the what if scenarios. I just have big concerns. I don't know a lot of farmers, but I know him and I know his neighbor, and those were their concerns. And the other thing that I have a concern about is that I think this has more of a serious domino effect than what we think, and I just don't know what that would be. Because when I read the testimony, when I look at the exceptions, the provision would not apply to law enforcement officers during the course of officers' duties. Then that becomes up for a local municipality or local agency as how they define what the law says. Does this restrict local agencies that not in a law enforcement capacity, but in assisting, helping federal agencies that come in? Could it be anything? Meat packing plants. It could be big manufacturing businesses that they would need assistance to on. So I have a lot of concerns, and and I'd say about 40% of those are the unknown concerns. But the ones that I do know is if I think that I'd be surprised, and I guess my question would be, has the Cattlemen's Association made comment on this bill? Is soybean people made comments in support or for or against this bill? I think it's running under the radar pretty good. I get the property rights thing. I'm a big property rights guy. I get that. But it's the safety concern more that bothers me. So I wouldn't be supporting it. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm just saying that's my position. And I think that later on, this might be something that we see a backlash from and be too late. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments? Representative?
With all due respect, I am a farmer. By this time the state got there, all your cows would be dead. That's a moot point. They would never be there on time anyway. I don't know what farmers you've talked to. Your home is your castle. Our farms should be our castles too. We should be protected. What we have been through is unspeakable. There shouldn't be any amount of money that we spend to get this stopped. If it's a little inconvenient for them, that's tough. They should not be allowed to get on our property without permission, period. It's just like I came and walked through your yard, your house, without permission. We don't do that, but we get it done to us, and it's not right. And if you think your cows are going to die from poison water, they're going to be dead, I guarantee you, before the state even thinks about getting out there. You have to use common sense.
We got to do the fair board today, so respond if you'd like. You have
Just one question.
and then one question.
Representative, I totally respect your opinion, and mine was, I'm no farmer. And when you said you don't know what farmers I talk to, well, everybody has a different opinion. But let me ask you this. You had an incident, didn't you, that you were unhappy about when they stepped on your property?
Absolutely.
And so you weren't home. Are you an animal breeder? Is that what you are?
I owned a kennel.
So did they write you up for any
I
citations?
was at if you own a kennel in Kansas, legally, you have to be home 24/7, 365, within 30 minutes of your house. I went and gave blood. If you can, where we live, there's no, unless you have a designated person to sub for you, there's no way anybody could get to your house, or you could hire anybody to come out there. I went and donated blood, which I've done all my life. I came home, I had a $200 fine on my door. It did not go over well. It should not happen. It should not be a law. It's crazy. Nobody else has to live like that.
Were you forced to pay that fine by the
Yes, I
courts?
was.
So-
This is a double standard. It's just like this search warrant. If we don't sign off on it, they'll put us out of business because we can't sell our puppies. We can't give them we have to have a state license. So we have no choice. It's a dirty, dirty deal. Just like this 30-minute thing. I have never, and people we talk to don't even believe it. I have never heard of anything like it in my life. And it's a law.
So if you don't mind me asking, and I'm not trying to be offensive.
No, that's fine. You can ask whatever you want.
Was the call based on emergency or cruelty or?
It was just a routine inspection. They make a big deal out of, we can come anytime, 24/7, anytime we want, and that's how they inspect us. We are inspected more than the babysitters.
Okay, guys, that's part of the license. You're right on your deal. You both had a good talk.
Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome. I'm
Any
glad
other-
you asked.
Where we've had a second.
Yes, I got.
You got a question? Yeah, you got a question.
Just a follow-up question for legal. And the question's been brought up like the previous representatives, but for KDOT and KCC, on the first paragraph of it says acting within the scope of the employer's employment. Does that not exempt the KCC and KDOT when they have to, if it's in the scope of their employment?
No.
And then why not if that's the case? Just for clarification.
No, Mr. Chairman. The scope of the employment is what actually would institute the prohibition from entering. So when they're on the job as be KDOT, KCC, or any agency, when those folks are out there in their duty to go out and inspect or to try to do citing or whatever, when they're in the scope of their employment, they would have to follow either get the documentation or the written consent. So the scope of employment is actually what puts them into the requirements to get the written consent or the documents not. It would be when they're outside the scope of the employment, that's when they're not having to follow that.
Okay, but when it's protection, designated protection, would that exempt them at that point? Because it doesn't just give them the right of way, what we're trying to fix here. But if it's an emergency, like you said, or a spill or something like that, designated protection should cover that, then would that not?
The extreme circumstances would cover that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, if there was the exigent circumstances, if there was a immediate danger, a spill, something that they had to, there's life and limb in jeopardy. In that situation, they could cite to that and go on, but there would have to be that that extreme exigent circumstances.
So that should answer your question on an emergency situation. Only emergencies. Is that not correct?
Pass.
Representative, it doesn't, because it's not defined, it's left up to interpretation. So it's just like when a law enforcement officer pulls you over, reasonable suspicion. So it can be at that time there's no consistency with it. Every inspector could have a different interpretation of it. It's not defined, so it really doesn't answer my question. There could be a guy there that says, I'm not going to get in no trouble. I'm not doing nothing. And then you can have one guy that says, I don't care if I get in trouble, I'm moving forward. It just doesn't define it enough.
Okay. But if a pipeline breaks, I think that would be no question. So thank you.
Thank you. That was the same line of questioning I was going to go through.
No discussion, not a question, but I can't support this. We went through a long, lengthy process before we got the Animal Act bill passed a few years ago, and it is part of the licensure. It is small animals, it is large animals, it is feedlots, it's hog barns, it's all, I mean, we did the whole thing. I think there's too much, it's a too broad a law. I mean, government employees, we just had a number the other day, Dylan gave it to us in committee. I believe it was, well, you told me 47,000 and somebody said 14,000 government employees in Kansas. How are we going to get the word to these people that they don't dare walk up on somebody's yard for in their employment? And I also believe that it is just impossible to go through the list of people and exempt various organizations from the rule, which might protect some of us who have issues that we want to fix. But the rest of the people could still be breaking the law, subject to actually violence, because we have stand your ground laws in Kansas, and that worries me a great deal, that people can actually say, I felt threatened, this person was on my property. I just cannot support this, and I hope that everyone will vote against it. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
I believe, any other discussion? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say in final closing to the representative that if I wasn't trying to offend you. I apologize. I was just trying to understand, and I'd be willing to support you on eliminating the 30-minute rule. But my concern is more the domino effect. This has a bigger impact, I think, of things known and unknown to us. Thank you.
Unless there's any further discussion, we've had a motion and a second, correct? Those in favor, raise your right hand. I can't vote. Those opposed? Where are we at there, Dalen?
3-5.
The bill passed. So the bill's passed out. And I'm glad we got this one done, because the next one's fun. It's the fair. So, so we're going to open up the hearing on the state fair. And Luke, we're going to the fair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury with Legislative Research, and I will be going over the state fair's budget for you all today. You should have the handout of the budget analysis. It starts on page 897, but I would actually like to begin my presentation on page number 899. On page 899, again, similar to the layouts of all the rest of the budget analysis that you've seen throughout the session, we'll talk a little bit about the general fund for the state fair. Prior to FY 2018, SGF monies were only used for debt service expenditures for the fair. Beginning in FY 2018, the agency also budgeted $150,000 SGF for utility costs. In 2020, the agency received $205,000 from the coronavirus relief account of SGF to replace lost revenue from non-state fair events and RV park reservations that were canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, the agency received $2.3 million from the coronavirus relief account from the SGF to replace lost revenue due to the cancellation of the 2020 state fair event. Approximately half of those funds were expended in 2021, and the remainder reappropriated into 2022. The legislature did appropriate $14.5 million from the SGF for 2023 for the state fair's capital improvement budget. And for 2024, the agency anticipates decreased SGF expenditures. Again, that SGF amount was approved, that 14.5 was approved by the 2022 legislature. We'll talk about those capital improvement expenditures more specifically when we get to the end of the presentation, where we'll dive in specifically more into capital improvements. For now, if you turn over to page number 900, we have an examination of the State Fair Fee Fund. Similar to other fee funds and other agencies that you all have seen, the State Fair Fee Fund is predominantly how the State Fair funds its activities. So beginning on page 900, State Fair Fee Fund is funded from both State Fair and non-State Fair activities that take place on the State Fair grounds. Revenue sources include the admission fees that folks pay to get into the event, along with grandstand entertainment fees, premium book advertising, building rentals, sales and concessions, and parking fees. The agency estimates the total non-state fair use of the state fairgrounds to be nearly 600 events throughout the year. So that's to say that in addition to the week-long fair event, that those grounds don't simply just sit empty during the year. It's also used by other or by other entities throughout the year. Taking a look at underneath there for page 900, we got an examination of revenues and expenditures along with any balances over time. As you can see, 2021 was depressed in comparison to 2020 and 2022. That's a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. You will see then in 2024 estimates for 2023 and 2024, revenues continue to increase with expenditures also increasing, and then that as well will lead or is anticipated to lead to lower ending balances in the State Fair's fee fund by the end of FY 2024. If we move on to page number 901, that's the beginning of the FY 2023 analysis. Again, the table up here at the top is the legislatively approved amount. So that was, which was approved by the 2022 legislature. And then we go line by line. Items correspond on the left-hand side, correspond with blurbs or narratives down below. The 2022 or subsequent to the 2022 session, there was one adjustment that was made to the State Fair's $20.9 million in appropriations, and that is a reappropriation of $36,040 of unspent SGF monies. So that is to say $36,000 was not spent in 2022 and is therefore rolling forward into the current year. And now we'll get into the agency estimate. The agency has submitted a revised FY 2023 estimate of $22.1 million. This includes $14.6 million from the SGF. This is an all funds increase of $11.1 million, or 5.5% above the agency's approved amount. The agency's request $14.6 million from the SGF, which is the same as the agency's approved amount. Item number 2. Contractual services. In FY 2023, the agency is estimating an increase in contractual service expenditures totaling $931,250. This is all from special revenue funds above the agency's approved amount. The increase is primarily attributable to increased expenditures for advertising, building and ground repairs, and entertainer contracts. So that is to say, you can think of like for entertainer contracts, the folks that show up to sing at the fair, do the different events at the fair, items like that. Advertising, getting word out, and then building and ground repairs. Item number 3 is an addition of 2.0 FTE positions. The agency indicates that a fully staffed Kansas State Fair operates with 28.0 FTE positions, with one of those FTE positions being contracted out for the Department of Agriculture for accounting services. So the State Fair requests adding 2.0 FTE positions and the associated funding to bring the agency to full staffing. This request totals $128,653 from all from special revenue funds and would increase the FTE count by 2.0 above the agency's approved number. Item number 4. All other adjustments. All other adjustments made by the agency total an increase of $88,850, and this increase is primarily attributable to increases in materials and supplies for buildings and grounds, which is partially offset by reduced estimated expenditures for capital outlay, such as vehicles and software. On page number 902 is the governor's recommendation. The governor recommends no changes to the agency's 2023 revised estimate. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or I can move on to FY 2024.
Do you have any questions on anything so far? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is not a question. We have new members and I'd like to point out the sales tax we dedicated the sales tax to the fair about 4 years ago or something like that. And so up until then, there was no state general fund in the fair. It was all special revenue, which was fee funded. So when we look at the money, I may have some questions about the money for state general fund, but I wanted to just make that note because there was not any money, state general fund money before that. Thank you.
Follow up on her question, is that broke out anywhere? If she wanted to know how much sales tax was collected, Luke?
Mr. Chair, for myself, I can't, just looking at the data that's presented, I can't pull that out, but I can reach out to the agency and identify how much of that revenue is collected from sales tax.
Go ahead.
And Mr. Chair, I think to follow up with that, and is it budgeted or is there a fund that there's a balance on the state general fund? Is it all being budgeted to spend or is there some in the bank?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I believe, and I'll double check again, but those dollars would be collected by the state fair into their state fair fee fund, which would then be allocated for expenditures out. They may not spend all of it. You know, it is typically normal for monies to roll over in fee funds from year to year, but that would go into the state fair fee fund.
But I'm trying to ascertain if there's enough money or if there's a surplus in money in the way we wrote that legislation. I want to know how effective it is for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. You want to continue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we move on to page number 904 is the FY 2024 analysis. Again, at the top of the page is a table. We will start with the agency's revised estimate for 2023, identify any changes that have been made by the agency, call those out again by numbers that correspond with the left-hand side and the blurbs down below. The agency requests $7.8 million, including $135,000 from the general fund for 2024. This is an all funds decrease of $14.3 million, or 64.6% below the agency's revised estimate for 23. This includes an SGF decrease of $14.5 million, or 99.1% below the agency's revised estimate for 2023. And then we'll get into the why. Item number 1 is the completed capital improvement projects. The agency estimates completing a number of capital improvement projects in FY 2023, and those expenditures are not estimated to carry into FY 2024. Projects that the agency anticipates being completed in 23 are the Bison Arena, road repairs, adding some air conditioning units to certain buildings on the fairgrounds, renovations to the expo center, an installation of a public address system. And then each one of these projects are currently funded in part by SGF. So then that is to say that when those projects are completed, they are not in the agency's base request. So then that is coming out. So that's item number one. Item number two is the SGF reappropriations. If we remember from 2023, they experienced $36,040 in reappropriations from the general fund in 23. Again, those dollars are estimated to be expended in 2024, and so therefore will not carry over into 2024. All other adjustments made by the agency total $214,948. Again, this is all special revenue funds. The increase is primarily attributable to increased expenditures for entertainer contracts, marketing and advertising, and utilities. Increases in these expenditures are partially offset by reduced expenditures for vehicles and office furniture in 2024. The governor recommends no changes to the agency's FY 2024 request. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or I can move to agency capital improvement projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page number 910, for me, it's the back page of the handout. Again, similar layout to what you all are used to seeing from 23 and 24. We have capital projects that are listed on the left-hand side, and then you have actual expenditures along with budgeted expenditures for 23 and 2024. The agency has estimated revised capital improvement expenditures of $15.2 million, including $14.5 in SGF in 2023. This is an all funds decrease of $8,000 or less than 0.1% below the agency's approved amount. And again, this amount does equal the agency's approved amount for 2022. Some items that are being included in these estimates are road resurface. If you all have been to the state fairgrounds in Hutchinson, you'll notice there's many roads on the property. They're wanting, or right now approved for and budgeted at $2.5 million to resurface a lot of the roads down there. The Expo Center got some updates to the interior of that building and some other items, $450,000 for that. Grandstand repairs, where the folks sit, as you're watching the events, entertainers, whatnot. The air conditioning units, there are several buildings across the state fairground that do not have AC at all. And so the agency is estimating or is budgeted and approved expenditures for air conditioning units to include some of those in different buildings around the state. The public address system, currently the state fair doesn't have a way to let patrons know about any emergencies, so to speak. So that's like if there was a tornado or severe weather in the area, the agency couldn't just blast like a PA system, hey, seat cover, that sort of deal. So that $1 million is for that. New storage building totaling $300,000, and then currently in the Bison Arena at $10 million. That building is currently not in use as it was under inspection or shut down from the state fire marshal. So the $10 million there is to renovate that Bison Arena. And then, Mr. Chair, I can stand for any more questions and I did fail to mention as well, and I apologize to the committee, but Brian Schultz is here, General Manager of the Kansas State Fair, and he will be able to answer any questions, and he has a presentation as well for you all.
Yeah, look, I thought I read as you were talking that the Bison Arena had been completed. Is that so? It's not. Okay, I thought I saw that when you were reading, and so we allowed that money last year. So I guess we'll get a report of what's been done at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any more questions for Luke? Good job, Luke. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, just one other item, and I did fail to mention during the capital improvement project as well, but the state committee on state building construction, if I can get it out, has reviewed capital improvements for this agency and does recommend the agency's capital improvements. And with that, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Brian? Glad to see you again.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity. Brian Schultz. Okay, there we go. Brian Schultz, Kansas State Fair. I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you today. We do have a PowerPoint that we'll walk through. I handed it out yesterday to everyone. I hope you still have it. Otherwise, we can just take care of it on the screen. So the Kansas State Fair, we're celebrating all things Kansas. And I know several of you have seen this presentation. I apologize, but we'll go forward here. Oops. All right, there we go. All right, so the Kansas State Fair was established in 1913. So we're looking at 110 years this year. Our estimated attendance at the Kansas State Fair is about 350,000 people each year. This last year, we were at about 318,000. How are we governed? We're governed by a 13-member board of directors. Excuse me. We have members of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, the Fairs and Festivals Association, the travel industry. We have extension districts from the Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and then also our Central District. We also have a representative from the Department of Agriculture. We have Secretary Mike Beam. We have someone from the Extension Agency and somebody from the Commerce Department, as well as 2 members at large on our board of directors. All these positions are appointed by the governor and serve 3-year terms. So where does our fundings come from? As it was stated, we are a fee-funded organization. All of our funds come from monies that we garner during the state fair and 600 other events that happen throughout the year. So that would include our commercial vendors, our corporate sponsors, our food sales, our RV park, gate admission, concert tickets, and then our midway sales. Now, as far as our RV park goes, right after the fair every year, we have 3 back-to-back weekends that bring in anywhere from 100 to 300 RVers from across the country. So that's a great opportunity for us to increase our revenues there. So let's give you a year in review of the Kansas State Fair. So this last year, and on the side here, you can kind of see our attendance over the years. In 2019, we were at 278,000, 315,000, which was a 10.56 increase over 2021. Our gate admission, you can see we had about $1.3 million in 2019, and in 2022, we were at 2.7, which was a 58% increase. Our grandstand entertainment recap, in 2019, we had 429,000, which was an 86% show paid. I'll get into that in just a second. You'll see in 21, we did have an increase. And then in 2022, we were at 895,000, which was 151% show paid. What that means is if our shows cost $600,000, we had 151% paid, and then we showed a profit, as you can see here, of almost $300,000. Okay, North American Midway Entertainment, that is our carnival. As you'll see here, in 2019, we had 1.5 million in revenue. 2021, we went to 1.69. And in 2022, we had 1.87. They're seeing a fantastic growth in the carnival. This carnival comes actually from the Florida side, comes across, does our fair, and then goes down to Tyler, Texas, and then they go back. Getting a carnival nowadays is almost impossible for a lot of fairs. So we are very blessed with NAME, or North American Midways. They provide a very fantastic and very safe carnival for our area. So SB2 was a huge impact on the Kansas State Fair. If you look at the revenue, gross revenues from 2019, we brought in 327,000. In 2021, 384,000, which was a 14.69% increase. And then in 2022, we're up at $679,000, which was a 43.51% increase. Reason for that was the ability for people to walk around the grounds, to enjoy a beverage as they were going from building to building. We did have about 5 buildings on the grounds that we did not allow any alcohol in. We didn't have any issues. Kansas Highway Patrol gave us a thumbs up. They said there were no issues at all. I mean, there was, you're going to have your normal a minor here and there, but there was a lot of people, including a lot of legislators, that said this is going to be a bad thing. It shouldn't happen. Just on the contrary, you can see from our numbers and with the Highway Patrol, we didn't have any issues. So we're looking forward to that again here in the future. So let's talk about the upgrades that Luke had talked about. So I'm just going to go really quick through here. These are just a breakout of all of the different upgrades that we had done with the $14.45 million that we're proposing. So we'll start with the Oz Gallery and 4-H Centennial Hall. This is putting air conditioning in these buildings. We estimated about $250,000 is what it was going to cost for each building. Our bid price came in at $241,000. And that was for the Oz Gallery and 4-H Centennial Hall. We did talk to the mechanical contractor yesterday, and there is a little bit of a lag in getting the units, but we have been assured that they will be ready for us for the 2023 fair. All right. So Expo Center renovations, there we did have a phase one. This started in 2021. We completed it in March of 22. That included a new roof, sidewalls, columns, ventilation, lighting, and electrical service. This was a KDFA financed of $1.3 million. Phase two is to increase the beautification in this building, including the arena, putting up new walls and new fencing in there, reworking the footing, which is the dirt. This is an equine center, so a lot of horse shows that come in and go. The second part of this is, and you can see the rail and the concrete on here. What that is we're going to be increasing the size of the concrete, and that'll run the whole facility. And then the rail that goes around that will be up, changed out and cleaned up. We're also going to be putting some new concrete in some of the dirt areas where we used to have stalls. And then also our restroom upgrades. These bathrooms are less than desirable to go in. I think a lot of our equine and cattle people would say that it's something that needed to be done. So if you kind of look at this is what the initial one looked like, and we do have a few of them that are completed, and it gives us a totally different look into that building. We're hoping to have that completed by next week. We also need to look at doing new doors. You know, it was on my slide and it's not showing up here, but I think yeah, well, there was supposed to be a new slide on here, and I don't know if it didn't get saved or what, but there is a brand new picture, and I think in some of your books it does show. They're completely gutted. What we did is we took an epoxy coat and we started at the ceiling. So I think there's some of the books that had we just had the upgrade done on Friday, so I tried getting them in. Sorry about that. I apologize. I can look and see if I've got a new one as well. But the epoxy runs from the top and goes all the way to the bottom. Brand new partitions, brand new fixtures and things. Yes. Brand new doors on the back side of it is another part that we're looking at. So you can look at the upgrades here. Overhead doors, we haven't purchased those yet. The arena and upgrades is at $415,000 was our budget. We're at $323,000. Let's see, asphalt repairs. This is another big part. We are 275 acres. We have lots of roads on the state fairgrounds, and they really needed to have an upgrade. The $2.5 million will go towards fixing these. You can see right here the sprawling that has happened. The second slide there, the yellow, that actually happened during fair last year. And we had to go out there with coal pack to fill it in. People were tripping, and it's a very dangerous when that happens. Let's see here. So our initial bid came in at $1.25 million, and you can see that that's a pretty big difference, but they haven't done any base work. So what that means is when some of those areas where the yellow was, we're going to have to cut that out and redo all the underlayment, and that's going to probably look at about another $1 million at minimum. When I started 19 months ago, the first thing I asked was, how do we get people's attention when they're on the grounds if we have weather, active shooter, or something like that? And I was told the Highway Patrol runs around with their golf carts and tells people, hey, get into safety. We didn't have a public address system. So with the monies that we received last year within the legislative session, we're able to put together a public address system, and it is we had estimated it at 1.92,000, and to date we have been able to. I'm sorry, my clicker is going a little faster at 1,014,000. So we're doing really well. We've been told that this will be up and in play for the fair. They have already started on quite a few of the buildings. Now, this system also is the same exact system that they use at SeaWorld. So we have all different types of messages that we can pre-program in there. If we know that we have imminent weather. Yes, sir.
Kind of like Wi-Fi. Is it hardwired? Is it hardwired or Wi-Fi?
These are all hardwired in there. Yep. So every building will have a separate set of speakers. So we can go to like the domestic arts and we can make an announcement in there, or we can go grounds wide if we know that there's imminent weather or an active shooter or something like that. We hit one button and everything is, the message goes out to everywhere. The Bison Arena, this was a question that was asked. 1937 is when this building was put into play for $103,000. It was used by the Navy in World War II. It was permanently closed in 2019. The fire marshal went in there, said it's not ADA compliant. There's no sprinklers. The doors are not proper use, so they shut us down. So we started looking at how we would be able to improve this building, making it into an ag innovation center. Our goal behind this is to highlight the agricultural areas within Kansas and showcase that to everybody coming in, from the kids to all ages. And by doing that, we're able to bring in displays of all of our commodity groups and bring in kids from all over the area just to teach the lessons of agriculture in our state. We're estimating that this building will run us about $20 million. We have hired an architect, IAA, out of Kansas City, and they are working right now at the structural side of it. The initial structural came in at $10,600,000. That was to change out all the windows, the electrical, the plumbing, redoing the roof, and bringing up two parts of the building that were sagging just a little bit. The brickwork needs a little bit of tuck pointing, and there's a little bit of rust by the windows, but other than that, the building is in fantastic shape. We're hoping within the next 2 years that we can get this opened. So these are just some just sketches that we're seeing. We'd like to add a grain bin over onto the north side where we can use as an educational piece with screens on the lower side and a breakout rooms on the top. Another interior shot that we're looking at. All the displays would be movable, so we could push them to the side and have other events in there as well. We're all about building traditions at the Kansas State Fair. One of the big things that I do when I walk around the grounds is I ask people, what brings you to the fair? And I hear everything from, you know what, I met my wife here. I kissed my first girl on the double Ferris wheel. We showed cattle together, all those things. And it's about building traditions. It's bringing your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids out there to share a Pronto Pup or an ice cream or whatever it is. And that's what we think about the Kansas State Fair in our 10 days. So we invite you to our next state fair, which is September the 8th through the 17th. And I know we're in the 11th hour. There are two things that I would ask if there's any consideration for this. Two pieces that we see within the fairgrounds is safety and security. And we have two areas that we really need to address. And if it can't be this year, maybe we'll have to put it into the budget for next year. Our cameras. We have a total of 10 cameras on the grounds. Those cameras are so out of date that we couldn't even tell who's coming in our front gates, let alone for the protection of people. We have put out an RFP on replacing those cameras, the 10 with 60 brand new cameras throughout the grounds, and it's going to run close to $600,000. These cameras would allow us to go into a lot of different areas. Over the last month, we've had a lot of vandalism on the grounds because we're open 365 days a year. People are coming in there in the middle of the night and they're damaging things, breaking into some of the buildings. We need to know who they are so we can get to the bottom of it, because it comes out of our budget if we can't catch them. The other issue is lighting on the grounds. Lighting has been a factor for many, many years. It just has never been brought up because it hasn't been a budget item. We really need to look at that. We have metal halogen lights throughout the whole grounds. We have started changing out 2 of our buildings right now, Sunflower North and Sunflower South. That cost us roughly $10,000 to do those 2 buildings. We had an electrician come in and he did an amperage test on it. We were using 57 amps out of 1 light ballast. By changing it to LED lights, we went down to 5 to 7 amps on there. So we can see a huge increase in savings on our electricity bill. The other thing is that there are so many dark areas on the grounds. And I am truly afraid of what could potentially happen. We have lots of walkers. We have lots of people that bring their dogs out there. We have a lot of bikers that go through there, but there's a lot of dark areas that we don't have lights in. And I'm waiting for that day that I get a phone call that something has happened. And I think by increasing our lighting out there with LED lights and just overall scape of lighting would definitely make it a more safe and secure place for us. We did an RFP on that, and again, it's close to $600,000 to upgrade the buildings and outside lights. So we're looking at about $1.2 million in additional funds that we would need to do those 2 projects. At this point in time, I stand for questions, and I appreciate your time and everything that you do for the Kansas State Fair.
Committee, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer 2 of the questions that Representative Carlin had as well, if you'd like. So you were questioning the sales tax. On average, it's about $340,000 that is brought in on a yearly basis. That amount goes directly into our capital improvements fund. We, as the State Fair, are mandated to put a minimum of $300,000 in addition into the capital improvements fund to help fund the other things that go on in this to match, basically. And then as far as you had questioned the carryover, that kind of just stays with that in that fund and goes out. We try keeping at least $200,000 to $250,000 in that fund at all times, just because we don't know if we had a major issue with an HVAC system or something else that would have happened on the grounds. As far as the insurance that we have on the grounds, it is part of a state pool. We have a $5 million deductible on the State Fairgrounds insurance. So a lot of these little projects that we have, that comes out of our capital improvements fund if we have weather or something like that. And that's something that I do have. I've questioned the governor on that about going out on our own, and we're doing our due diligence to be able to take that out and bring that down.
Thank you for that information, Brian. It seemed to me like, and you would know, I thought we capped the amount that the fair would receive in sales tax at 300,000, or did we just estimate it would be 300,000? You get whatever comes in, or do you only get 300,000?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carlin, I believe what it is it's a percentage of the sales tax that goes in there, and on average, it has been anywhere from 300. And this last year was up to about 340,000.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you. It's how many acres do you have again?
Mr. Chairman, we have 275 acres.
So, and you're open year round?
Yes, sir.
So do you have any security staffing there 24/7?
No, sir. We work with the Hutchinson Police Department. We just met with the chief the other day. We've asked them to start on a regular basis coming through there 2 to 3 times a night. But again, it's very dark. People hide behind buildings, up on top of buildings and stuff like that. So driving through is about the only thing that we have, but we don't have any full-time security staff on there, no.
There's probably no way you could have just minimal gates for entering, correct?
Correct. We do have, I think it was like 4 years ago, there was a federal grant that we received to have a bike path go through the grounds, which meant we had to be open 24/7, 365. We can lock down the main gates. It's very difficult because with shows and entertainment and events that we've got going on, we have one of our part-time employees that comes through and locks them down about 10 o'clock. But if they go till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, we don't have anybody to lock down those areas.
Yeah. 28 FTEs.
Correct.
Question.
And, I mean, hearing stories that vandalism and stuff is growing up there. The chairman's, question about security. Is there a fence completely around it that, other than the gates that you get in? I can't remember. I don't think there is there?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there is an area of fencing all the way around, but we do have 11 gates. We can secure 10 of those. Gate 1 is open 24/7.
Yeah, I appreciate it being open for a lot of things. If you put the cameras and lights on the gates, would that be sufficient to provide protection?
Well, the gates is
Because
just
that
the
would be,
initial
like
part.
like you said, if you have somebody drive through, they just hide.
It would increase the ability to find, with the new cameras, you can rotate them to see where they're going. They actually follow the car or the individual, to be able to see where they've gone, if they're stopping, who's getting out of the car. We can better identify who it is. The lighting is something that's needed the whole grounds wide, not just at the gates. We do have pretty good lighting at the gates. It's once you get into the interior of the grounds.
But if you've seen who was in and out of the gates at the time, would that help though some?
Mr. Chairman, not really, because there we have cars coming and going constantly. You would almost have to say, we think it was this one, we think it was that one, but by having more cameras out there, you can actually pinpoint it. We'd be able to download that and give that over to the Hutch PD.
Okay, thank you.
So following up with his question, it's just like whether you're whatever operation you are, some businesses to protect themselves actually have hours. You know what I'm saying? And, 8 to 5, or the fair closes at and the gates are closed, and if you're caught in there, I mean, you could do a little preemptive yourself to solve some of your problems, but right now, it seems the way it looks to me is like a lot of state-run operations. It's not mine if they break it. We'll get the state to fix it. Whereas if you're on a farm or your own property, you try to be a little more preemptive on that and say, I'd like to kind of eliminate my risk. You know what I'm saying?
Mr. Chairman, it would be ideal if we were an 8 to 5 business, but unfortunately, we are not an 8 to 5 business. With the other 600 events that we've got going on, we've got cattle shows that go till midnight. We have weddings and quinceañeras that go till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's difficult for us to shut it down or even have one gate unless you had somebody standing there and saying, "Are you with this party? Or are you with this horse show?" People are coming and going all the time. Like I said, with dogs walking out there, people running.
So, like, what I'm saying on that is that you would think for peace of mind, you'd like to know at a certain time of the day, there's nobody in the park or in the, you know what I'm saying? But it seems like there's no concern. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, but whatever. You're saying that you don't know whether there's anybody there at 3 in the morning or not.
Correct, because of the walkthrough paths and stuff like that. We have people out running. We have people out with their dogs. We have just people doing stuff they're not supposed to do, and it's very difficult. We can't close down the complete grounds at any point in time because of that federal walkway that we put in. That was part of it, that people could come and go as they needed. I understand where you're coming from, but it's being in a facility that is open 365 and has all these events. It's very difficult to say we're closing at 5 o'clock and nobody else can come in. I mean, they're jumping fences. They're coming through the walk paths. I mean, there's just no good way to patrol that.
As a comment, it's just sad for 100 years we never had a problem until the last 4 or 5, right? And that's indicative of our society, it seems like, anymore, for respect. So do you think the cameras and lights would be all you needed?
Right now, that is something that I think it would deter a lot of people, knowing that those cameras are there and increasing the lighting. So when we do have security or even our staff going through there, it would give us the opportunity to see them if they're lurking behind buildings or that kind of stuff. Yes.
I know I've talked with people on security, And motion sensor lights are more important than lights on all the time, because like they tell you, when the light's on all the time, they can hide in the shadows. When the light doesn't come on, they don't know where you're going to shoot from. Oh, wait a minute. Did I mean the camera shoot from? Sorry. Had to make everybody smile.
So,
Smile.
just a question, Representative, did you want to make an amendment? Are you looking for doing something, or we just?
I'd like to talk with you. Maybe, what do you think?
Well, I can see the need, and I would also suggest that as the chairman was talking about the gates, I don't care if you've got a wedding going on there, you don't need all your gates open. So I would highly recommend that you get a schedule of gates being closed for, if you're in this part, we close these. If you're in this part, we close. And so you don't have all of that exposure, because this is genuinely a problem. I just recently had I have a camera in my backyard, and I watched a man play in my backyard for 15 minutes one morning. He was trying to light my charcoaler and he was looking in my windows. So I put a bunch of cameras out and I spent about $1,400, and my house is surrounded with cameras and lights. Now I realize this would be different because of the size. But every time the skunk goes across my backyard, I get a notice on my phone that there's an animal or a person in my yard. So I caution you to think that cameras are going to be effective. But I mean, if there's actually a vandal going in through a door, you might get a good picture. But I do think the lighting would be very helpful. And I also think it would be exciting to lift the fare up a bit, to have more lighting.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject on that, we only allow certain gates open when we have weddings and or whatever's going on. We don't open up the whole grounds. We will, if they're domestic arts or the Sun North and Sun South, we'll open up the main gate and gate 3 so they can come and go. But and then when there's a horse show, it'll only be gates 9 and 10 in those areas. So we are very cognizant of that. And just recently they're building the brand new fire station up on the corner of Main Avenue. We had 2 incidents where we had copper stolen the last 2 weeks, and the cameras, we're not able to even pick up on them because you can't see who it is. And this would also alleviate that. And they're jumping fences and they're tearing down fences to get in it. So this would help us. So we're not even able to give Hutch PD any type of footage at that point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering where you're at on your RFP, and I'm just trying to understand for both the cameras and the lighting. So you didn't present it as part of your budget. So this came after. So I'm just trying to understand this process and where you're at in all of this.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's correct. We started seeing more and more vandalism going on prior to putting our budget together. So it wasn't in there. The RFPs have gone, we've contacted the individuals that run our camera system right now, and that is the quote that they've given us. Obviously, we would have to go out for bid for it, but it gives us a very good idea. And as far as lighting, we've had a lighting consultant come in. We haven't actually gone out for a full-fledged RFP, but that's the numbers that they're giving us is what they're estimating it would cost. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and committee, viewing what you're saying with this, and since it is kind of the last hour for appropriations, if we was to make a motion to give you maybe 300 to 350,000 to match your sales tax to help you get started, would you be in favor of that?
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate that. A lot of that sales tax has already been
I'm moving that we appropriate another 350 in addition to your sales tax that you could use. That would get you started with some of the stuff immediately instead of having to wait for another year.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, if any dollars would help us to start putting the cameras in, and we could that would be our first part, and then going into lighting later would be helpful.
Does anybody have any questions on that before I make an amendment?
I guess if you could break that down into lights and cameras. I'm not a big supporter of cameras because if I have graffiti on my garage, I know somebody spray painted it. If I have a camera, I just see them spray painting it. And it's very hard that anybody's arrested because it's hard to identify who they are. So I'd support all that in lighting. I don't support any of it going to cameras.
My
But-
point being that they make the decision, but the lighting, I think, would be a help, especially motion sensor.
Yeah, but I'd make it specific on the mounts because I don't want to see all of it going on lighting. I mean, on cameras when I think the lighting's the biggest deterrent. I'm not going to go, vandalize Kent's car if there's a lot of light. I may if there's a camera, but not a lot of light. No, it's a friendly request.
That's what I was trying to say, Representative, is that the cameras really, to me, are not as effective. But if you have a light there, people will notice immediately if you have a motion light that comes on, and that'll deter more. And I would suggest that this committee might just restrict it to lighting for the first year and see how things go for you, because you could light up the fair pretty well with $300,000. That's my concern, and I would make that a substitute motion.
Discussion. Second over here. Discussion on that motion would be, when you put a sign up, video surveillance or whatever like that, if you just have a sign that says lighting, it's kind of, that deters nothing. But
Don't
if
have
you're
to have a
if you're at the position in your thought that you wouldn't prosecute anybody, and the state's pockets are deep enough to replace everything they steal, that's one thought. I think if you're going to do it, I was looking through your capital improvements. If somebody's doing as much as they are, you might shift some of your improvements to get your lighting done, and just anybody fix the water line if it's breaking. So you've got some money, and that's my discussion. Anybody else? Yep.
Do you presently have signs up to say that the area is under video surveillance?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we do. Unfortunately, you have to be very cognizant on how and where those are located. It's all part of public safety. If you have a sign up that says these grounds are under surveillance and something happens and you actually don't have a camera in that area, there has been litigation of saying, you told me when I came on the grounds that you had cameras or you had proper ways of safety, and it didn't happen and it backfired. Because so that's and I would argue that the cameras are probably, in my eyes, a little bit more of a need right now, just because of being able to prosecute when we can see who they are and when they're driving on the grounds versus and adding the lights. And I understand where you're coming from as well.
Okay, who's the motion you're working on?
The substitute motion was that we would add to the budget $300,000 for lighting, for motion lighting at the fair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question on what fiscal year would this for?
For 2023,
2023.
which ends July 1st, so you would have it for the fall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question. You had said motion lighting. Does it have to be specific for motion lighting? Can it be just lighting in general? We would be looking at, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Then you can use both.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one other point of clarification. $300,000 in 2023 SGF for lighting at the State Fair. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
So I don't know. So how much lighting do you think you could be able to purchase with that amount?
300,000.
No, I mean, yeah, I understand that. But I mean, I'm just curious, how many light poles, just based off of what you have now?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we would have to go back with the lighting consultant and say, these are the areas that we need to change out the metal halogens to an LED light and being able to put them on the timers so they would come on at dusk and go off at dawn. Um, initially, like I said, we were looking at about $600,000 to do the vast majority of the grounds. Yes. So I would say estimated half.
Okay, here we are.
All right, let's try this one more time. I think the motion should be, I will move that we put $300,000 SGF into the state fair for lighting for 2023 and an additional 300,000 for lighting for 2024. And that would give him the amount of money that he thinks he needs to do lighting fair. And in a 2-year time, which gives him time to get it all done.
Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did make a comment, I don't know if everybody heard it, that you thought that there would be places where you could use cameras that would be very effective. So do you have any funds that you can use for cameras at this time?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm thinking we might have $200,000 maybe in our capital once we get a little further down the road that we could put towards that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the current motion is to add $300,000 from the SGF for lighting for the Kansas State Fair in fiscal year 2023 and in fiscal year 2024. That would be $600,000 over the course of 2 fiscal years from the general fund.
The amendment passes back on the fair board.
Mr. Chair, seeing no further discussion, I move out the budget for the fair for the next several years.
Those in favor of Representative? All right, Luke?
As amended,
Okay,
with deer cameras.
okay. So, we voted on that?
No.
Okay, so sending the fair on the way with its budget. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the State Fair Board and our staff, thank you very much. We appreciate it and we look forward to seeing you in September at our legislative day.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Have a great day.
We're adjourned.